Howdy. Hey, we're going to talk about competition and the invisible hand. This is an amazing chapter. I mean, it's a short chapter, but it's an amazing chapter because it gets into a process, a concept that if it had actually been invented by some person, he or she would have won every award that there is to award. And note that it's called the invisible hand, which means there isn't any bureaucracy. There's not any humans deciding what other humans should do. It's not centralized planning. It's the opposite. Well, there's still planning. It's decentralized planning through the price system. See, that's the key coordinating method. We've already talked about the price system a little bit, but this gets after some additional aspects of it. Now that we've talked about competition and how that works, we can talk about some additional elements of the price system and how that works and the literal miracles that it provides. Almost on its own, it can do unbelievable things until the world gets a little bit crowded, and then you have to start tinkering around the edges of it because there are externalities generated. Some that we want to encourage, of course, positive externalities with subsidies, and negative externalities. Sometimes we have to address them with taxes or tradable allowances or that sort of thing. So what we're saying here is that when we have competition in markets, price equals marginal cost decides each firm's desirable output level, the output level they desire, because it maximizes their profits. We get all kinds of societally valuable, critical benefits. If you consider economic growth and well-being, all of that critical, you get critical outcomes from consumers being selfish. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, a lot of them are. They're looking to cut every last dollar out of every last sale that they possibly can. Some consumers, maybe the vast majority, are just utterly brutal. If they can figure out a way to save a dime on it, they'll drop you like a bad habit. Okay? And then there's the greedy producers, right? If they can figure out any way to squeeze another dollar out of a sale, they'll do it. All right? But in a competitive environment, that selfish, greedy behavior produces socially beneficial outcomes. And that's pretty darn important because we, sadly, can count on most people being sort of selfish and brutal about who they buy from, and about most producers looking out for themselves and trying to make as much money as they can. And one reason for that on the second part of that is in our competitive world, when you try to make as much money as you can, sometimes that's not very much. It may be just barely enough to cover your opportunity costs, which is, of course, what we've been meaning now for a little while, I guess not too long, depending when you view this. By zero economic profit is the normal outcome. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit more in this video and why that results and why that's important. Okay, so self-interest yields beneficial outcomes to society, and thank goodness, because most people do mostly pursue, not always, but mostly pursue self-interest. It's hard to discern for most people exactly what the social interest is, and plus it takes most of your day to support yourself and your family. You better spend most of it pursuing self-interest. All right, so as we learned from the previous discussion, in a competitive market, each firm sets their output level so that the price that they take as given, price-taking behavior, right? That's the going rate. I want to sell it. I'm going to have to sell it at that price. If I want to buy it, I better plan to pay that. Okay, so everybody's facing the same price. Worldwide in many cases, right? Remember the international trade chapter, right? We have world prices. So then what we're going to have is worldwide, which is even better than just nationwide. Everybody faces the same price. Everybody will produce up to where their marginal cost is equal to that price. What does that mean? That means they'll stop with the unit that just barely covers the cost of making it, right? So it's the best quantity to produce. Let's just say it's 10. 10 may be the best quantity to produce, but the 10th unit of output wasn't the best amount, right? The 10th one was the one that just barely paid for itself, okay? So maybe the third or fourth one was the one that made the most money. The 10th one didn't make any money. That's why he stopped at 10, right? That's why it's the ideal amount. The 10th one was the last one that added to your your bottom line, to your profit. All right, so when everybody is motivated to do that by their own self-interest, to produce so as to maximize their profit, they produce so that their marginal cost is equal to the price that everybody faces. And what that means is that whatever the amount produced is, the Q sub E, the equilibrium quantity, that quantity will be produced at the least possible cost. Okay, when the production of something is allocated across different producers so that the marginal cost is equal from producer A to producer B to producer C, that's what would be my equal marginal costs. Every producer has the same marginal cost of production by their choice. In other words, they choose the output level so that their marginal cost will, they don't care what somebody else is doing, but it'll turn out that their marginal cost is the same as everybody else's marginal cost because they're all producing self-interest. So what that means, and you'll see some graphs in your book that illustrate this in more detail, and so make sure you look at those carefully. Joe may produce 4 of product X so that his marginal, let's just set it up a little better. Let's say product X has a world price of $12 per unit. All right, so Joe, producer of X, will produce until the marginal cost rises to $12 and say, that's where I'm stopping. And maybe that's at quantity 7 for Joe. Fred, he may reach that point by producing 9 of the good. Sam, he may reach that by producing 23 of the good. Okay? So that allocation of a bunch by Sam and fewer by Joe and what's the other name that I use? Fred, Sam, and Joe. That minimizes the cost of the 3 of them producing 23 by 1, 7 by 1, and 9 by the other. That minimizes the total cost of producing 39 of those. What's 39? 23 plus 7, plus 9. Okay, so the total across the 3 of them is 39, and there's no cheaper way to produce 39 units of X than by having the marginal cost be equal among our 3 producers, Joe, Fred, and Sam. Joe produces 7, Sam produces 9, Joe produces 7, Fred produces 9, Sam produces 23. Okay, if you were to jiggle that any different way than Joe producing 7, Fred producing 9, and 23 produced by Sam, you get a higher sum total cost for producing those 39 units. And of course, that's wasteful. That's bad. What's another way to tell? Or what's a easy way to tell when you've minimized the total cost paid to produce something? Okay, I've said equal marginal cost. What if they're not equal? What if Joe had a marginal cost, which means the change in the total cost with the last one produced, marginal cost. What if Joe's 7, the 7th one, was produced at a marginal cost of $10? Okay? And Sam, producing his 23, the marginal cost was $15. Well, I think with a little bit of thought, it's obvious that that's not good. Maybe fine for Sam and Joe for some reason. That's not good from society's perspective. The difference between those marginal costs is waste. Okay? Joe's marginal cost is 10. Sam's is 15. Okay? If we switch a unit of output from Sam, saving us $15, to Joe, costing us $10, okay? Total output's the same. One less here, one more here. Okay, we saved $5. 15 less by Sam, 10 more by Joe. I think that's a proof. I think that's a proof that until the marginal costs are equal, right, total costs will not be minimized. Now, in that process of moving one from Sam to Joe, how does that equalize the marginal cost? Well, because the marginal cost line, sketch it on a graph. I don't know, this mirror thing is backwards. Is that making an upward sloping line? Anyway, the marginal cost line, the supply line, remember it's the same thing. The supply line is the marginal costs combined for all the sellers. So that's marginal cost line, is upward sloping. Okay, so when Sam does one less, because his is at 15 and Joe is at 10, Sam's marginal cost goes down. Okay, and when Joe does one more, his marginal cost goes up. Okay? So eventually, somewhere between 15 and 10, their marginal costs will be equal. Not necessarily right at 12.50, because the steepness of Sam's marginal cost line may not be the same as the steepness of Joe's marginal cost line. Now, let me take a quick mini break here to have a sip of water. My mouth's drying out. Now ask yourself, is the government likely to know exactly the shape of Sam, Joe, Susie, Fred, John, every name you can think of? The exact shape, the steepness of it, at what quantity, what the dollars per unit marginal cost is for every single producer of everything? Would we want them to know? And let me apologize. We shouldn't call them them. Would you want us to know? Because that's the government. The government's us. Would you want collectively everybody to know? Doesn't matter. They can't know. I can't foresee any technology ever where some central machine knows exactly at what rate everybody's cost per unit changes with the quantity of something continuously. In other words, if something changes it, bam-o, the machine is instantly updated. Of course, all those individual entities know that continuously. That's the beauty of the invisible hand. What some of us, and especially me, since non-economists or the public in general, they think this invisible hand thing is kind of silly. Well, all right. So I can't educate them all at one time. It's not silly. I can't educate them all at one time. So I'll just call it something different that maybe sounds better. But it's exactly the same thing. The invisible hand is exactly the same thing as decentralized planning. Okay? So you see, that's why decentralized planning is such a wonderful thing. Because every single member of the decentralized planning units, they know their marginal benefits, they know their marginal costs, and they know it continuously for all things all of the time. Okay? And then they can participate through the price system. They can participate through the price system, decide when they want to buy something and when they want to sell it. Okay? When they want to be the producer of it versus I'd rather be the consumer of it. When they want to export it versus when they want to import it. And in that way, the market reflects an immensely more amount of information. Is that grammatically correct? The market harnesses a lot more information than any central planner ever could. As I often say, often to the amazement of my audience, a single price contains a lot more information than any government study or any government bureau as a whole has ever contained. Studies, like this thick sometimes. A single price for a single good contains the sum total knowledge motivated by self-interest to either buy something as cheaply as possible or to sell it for as much as possible. Harnesses all of that, all in one single number. Sorry, I'm getting kind of screechy because it's just such an awesome thing. And another awesome thing about it is it does need a little bit of fine-tuning occasionally. Externalities, that kind of thing. Not enough competition. What can we do to have some more competition or somehow tolerate and live with less competition in the case of naturally not so competitive circumstances? So there's room for us economists to have to estimate MC lines and MB lines and say, from a normative perspective, here's what I think we should do about this little quirky malfunction of the private system. It must have been somebody that didn't like the free market that called it market failure, because it's just like the whole world came crashing down. No. Market failure, as it's been labeled, means that it didn't get it exactly right. It missed by that much. And by golly, we don't want to miss it all, so let's tinker with it a little bit and now we haven't missed it at all. That Pigovian tax thing, right? We're going to internalize a negative externality. We're going to go from having the equilibrium be that close to the optimum to being right at the optimum, right? That's what it's all about. Okay, so the free market either does brilliantly or pretty well. And when it does pretty well, if we're careful in how we construct our public policies, we can make it better. Of course, the government isn't perfect either. Political failure is really much worse than market failure. I guess I guess it's not really easy to measure that across all markets and all political processes. So I suppose I've expressed an opinion there. In any event, sometimes the market failure, the little difference between how far we are from perfect, can be big enough that, and certainly is in some cases, that even the imperfect political process is likely to do something that will make things maybe not perfect, but closer to perfect. And in other cases, maybe I ought to just leave well enough alone. There were enough examples in your previous homework assignment of where there was some external cost, but it wasn't policy relevant, or private negotiations weren't going to get it done because there just wasn't a big enough gap imperfection gap for the cost of doing something about it to be worthwhile. Passing gas in the elevator example. Yeah, that's sure annoying when it happens, especially if it's not easy to get out on the next floor. And it's probably doesn't rise to the level of passing a law and creating an enforcement mechanism and all of that to address it. Okay, so let me just go back to the basic fundamental concept that I'm trying to get across here. One of the things that a free market almost always does, and sometimes we have to help it a little bit by addressing not enough competition or spillovers, externalities. And one of the things that it almost always does, just by counting on people to pursue greed, the desire to maximize profit, is that it minimizes the total cost of producing the equilibrium amount. Okay, price equals marginal cost 1, marginal cost 2, and so on. The marginal cost of every producer of something will just naturally turn out to be approximately the same. Yes, it's undergoing constant adjustment as conditions change, but they're almost always in the vicinity of the same price that they're always looking at. And so, with marginal costs are equal, as I just illustrated with an example, we are achieving the total combined cost of all the producers. We're minimizing that total cost of their combined output. Okay, and again, the central planner cannot possibly know these different shapes and sizes and, exactly where on the graph the MC line is for all the producers of everything. Just not going to happen. This is one of the important reasons that central planning, any attempt at it, has always been an utter disaster. Look at Venezuela today. If you said, what's going on in Venezuela, Google that. Have a look at that. It's a real-time picture of what happens when humans, with the best of intentions, I hope, let's give them credit for that. Somebody thought it would be a better way to do things, thought that greed is an unconscionable way to guide how things are done. And it really does sound like it is. That's why it's dangerous to have a society that's undereducated, because then they can vote for things that sound good that are really dumb. Okay? So, with the best of intentions, the folks in Venezuela have just made an utter disaster out of what was once a very prosperous country. May not have been totally fair, and sure, why did some people make so much more money than others? And attempts to correct that politically have I suppose, made things more fair in the sense that more people are equal in poverty. Okay, so one of the trade-offs in the free market is, depending on how you define equity, can be seen as an efficiency equity trade-off. Free market is a brutal producer of efficiency. If you can't produce, you're just not going to get any piece of the ability to consume. And that sounds pretty brutal, right? I mean, that means a lot of people that, for whatever reason, either didn't, born with disabilities, or just didn't have a chance to get skills before they had to start supporting themselves and their families, are going to be poor. So, in many places, that seems to have prompted an overreaction in the sense it's got to be more fair. We can't let these greedy producers amass millions and billions of dollars. And in the process of that, everything's just gone to heck in a handbasket, and the people waiting in line for food, and just all kinds of terrible things happening. No one has anything now, rather than a few people having a lot, and most people having a fair amount, and a few people at the low end that, from my experience, I don't want to get into that. Okay, let me have another quick... I see that I've been yakking for 20 minutes now. I'm going to cut it off here. Give you a chance to take a break too, without having to freeze the camera. And I'll be back in a couple of minutes to chat some more. And you can be back whenever you wish to view the second edition of this discussion of the invisible hand.